It's 9 a.m. and I would like to call to order the teleconference meeting of the Transportation Committee of Thursday, June 24th, 2021. Before we begin, please be advised the meeting is being recorded. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Thank you and good morning, everyone. Director Hill.
Here.
Present. Director Maston.
Here.
Director Melgar. Absent. Director Rabbit.
Here.
Director Rodoni. Oh, we may have just lost Director Rodoni. Director Snyder.
Here.
Thank you. Vice Chair Arnold. Absent. Chair Frederick.
Here.
Thank you. And President Barr.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. And also on the line, you have Director Cochran, Garbarino, Grosball, Hernandez, Theriot, and I believe Director Rodoni, did you just rejoin us?
I just rejoined. Thank you.
Thank you. You have a quorum and you are a committee of the whole. I'm going to confirm staff on the line. Dennis, are you here?
I am present.
Joe Wire?
Yes.
Thank you. Ava Barr-Furbish?
Present. Good morning.
Good morning. Kim Manolius?
Good morning.
Good morning. Steve Miller, are you on the line? He's not on the line. Mona Babata, are you on the line?
Present.
Thank you. Jim Swindler?
Present.
Thank you. Kelly Hopper?
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you very much. That confirms staff on the line.
Thank you very much, Madam Secretary. I'd like to remind everyone to mute their phones until after the staff's presentation, and remember to unmute when we open up for director discussions. After the staff's presentation, I'll be asking for any comments and or questions on the item. If there are questions, the Secretary or I will call on you accordingly. After the discussion portion, we will ask for any public comment before moving on. Each page of the meeting packet is numbered on the bottom right-hand corner for the ease of following along. We'll start with agenda item number 1, which is the reports of the district's accessibility, bus, ferry, and advisory committees. The staff report containing agendas and minutes from recent meetings can be found on page 3 to page 24 in your packet. Are there any questions or comments from the directors on this item? Are we hearing any, Madam Secretary?
I'm hearing none.
So that concludes the opportunity for discussion on the item. Before we move on, is there anyone from the public wishing to speak on this item?
I have no speakers on this item.
Hearing none, no action is required on this informational report. We'll move on now to agenda item number 4, which is presentation on the Golden Gate Transit and Golden Gate Ferry results of Ridership Survey. Copies of the presentation slides start on page 25 of your packet. The Director of Marketing and Communications, Dana Feller, is on the line to present the survey results. Ms. Feller, please begin.
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. I'm so excited to be here this morning to share with you what I consider some very good news, the findings of our May 2021 survey results. I will start by saying I'd like to first, before I begin, I'd like to give a shout out to Megan Goodwin in our marketing department who got the survey up online, analyzed the results, and put together this presentation. I'm just the messenger here today. So, as you know, we as you recall, we surveyed passengers in July of 2020 to find out what the effects that the pandemic had on their working situation and what their feelings were about how the pandemic would affect their future working conditions. Just in summary, you know, things looked pretty grim back in July 2020. So we went back out in May. We conducted this survey the last 2 weeks of May, And I am happy to report that there's a lot of good news in here. And so I hope you find it encouraging. First, we got more responses than we got back in 2020. We got 877 responses for the bus survey. I'm going to start with the bus survey results. And the survey was distributed on our website, via e-blast, on social media. And I also, this time, actually bought paid advertising on digital and print ads throughout Sonoma County and Marin County, hoping to gather people that maybe weren't riders that aren't in our distribution list on our e-blast. And so trying to expand our survey respondents. So if you will advance to page 26, and I'll start with the results. The first question we asked is, what best describes your current ridership status? So as you can see, for the majority, over 50%, were former riders. Those are the people that were probably telecommuting currently. About 30% were current riders. And then we got a little bit of potential new riders, which I was excited about. We'll advance to page 27. We asked, as businesses reopen, do you plan to return to your workplace? And this is very encouraging. 84% of respondents are going to return to the workplace in some form or another. You know, over 40%, 45% are going to go back full time, which I find very encouraging. And a very small number, just, over maybe 15% said they're going to primarily telecommute. So I find that to be very encouraging news. Advancing to, if you follow me on page 28, we asked them, will you consider using Golden Gate Transit for commuting when you return to work? And this is, we don't need to say much about this. It's very, very encouraging. 76% said yes. Only, maybe 24% said no. And if you look at the reasons why they're not going to use Golden Gate Transit, 22% said they're working from home, 9% said they prefer to drive, 7% said they don't feel safe about riding public transit. And I'll tell you, if you think about that, that's a really low percentage, because that's only 7% of the 24% that said no. It's really just like barely 2% of overall respondents, which is really encouraging news. We thought that the pandemic would make people feel reluctant to get on public transit, but that's turning out not to be now that people are vaccinated. And so that's a hurdle that we're probably, it's not as big a hurdle, as big a hurdle as we thought. Of the people that responded they noted that infrequent service and that riding the bus takes too long. That's why they're not going to use public transit. But if you look at this, it's very, very good news for us. Advancing to slide 29. Has your employer communicated a plan for returning to your office? 65% said yes. So what is the timing of that return? 30% are already back in the office. 25% say they'll be back by August. Additional 25% will be back by December, which means that by December, over 80% of respondents will be back to work. That is much sooner than we anticipated, with just a smattering of people coming back in 2022. So that's great news for us. It's a much faster recovery than we anticipated. Advancing to slide 29. What will your schedule, 30. We're at page 30. What will your schedule be upon return? Well, this is also really good news. Most people will be working traditional hours, and very few people will be working shorter shifts and stuff. So if you look at the days of the week too, that's really telling. The only day that's light, it looks like our normal commute. Mondays and Fridays have always been a little bit lighter, Fridays in particular. But, Monday through Friday, it looks like a strong commute. And then how many days a week will you commute? This is also very good news. If you look at it, 34% said 3 to 4 days a week, 28% 5 or more days a week, with only 28% saying 1 to 2 days a week. So the majority of people will be commuting 3 to 5 days a week, which is very good news for us as well. Moving to slide 31. So currently we are we have a service in the corridor, right? Our commute service is in the corridor, and we have a Route 72 that's serving Sonoma County. We have Route 54 that's serving northern Marin, and then we also have Route 27 serving southern Marin. So we asked people, are you able to access this commute corridor service at the Highway 101 bus pads and park and rides? And interesting, only about half. It was very split. So a little over 50% said they could access this commute service, this corridor commute service, and a little under said they could not. So we wanted to know if they were accessing this commute service, what park and rides were they using? And interestingly enough, the top 6, you can see Roanoke Park was number 1, Roland was number 2, Manzanita number 3, Spencer number 4, Lucky Drive number 5, and Alameda Del Prado number 6. And we wanted to get that information for planning purposes, of course. So we wanted to know if they could not access this corridor commute service, why not? Why couldn't they? Well, 33% said they needed to be able to walk to their stop. 18% said they didn't want to drive and park. And 14% said they don't have a way to get there. 34% responded other, and the top 3 things that they were concerned about was limited parking at the park and rides. They would bike if they had more bike racks, and concerns over safety at park and rides. And these are all things that we've heard before for sure. Advancing to page 32. Then we talked about our basic service. So we wanted to know if our basic service, which runs, it's our Civic Center routes are the 30, the 70, the 101, and our East Bay route 40. We wanted to know if currently we were running 60-minute frequency on that, and does that meet your needs? And overwhelmingly, no. The 1-hour frequency does not meet their needs. Over 65% said no. Then we asked if bus-only lanes and improved HOV lanes decreased travel times, would this encourage you to ride the bus? And of course, overwhelmingly, almost 80% said yes, it would, which is great news as San Francisco is starting to formalize and make permanent some of their bus-only lanes. And then we asked, would you consider using the ferry as an alternative to bus service for your commute? And a little over half of respondents said they would, that they would consider using the ferry over bus. Going to slide 35. We wanted to know driving versus public transportation. If you're choosing to drive your own vehicle, do you see that as a long-term way of commuting? And happily, 80% said they did not see it as a long-term solution for commuting, which is another indication that they will, even those that are choosing to drive, will come back to public transit when they feel it's right. Moving along to page 36. For our marketing purposes, we wanted to know, what trip planning tools they used, and we ranked them. The website came in number 1, transit app number 2, and Google Transit number 3. And moving along to page 37, we wanted to know how they heard about our survey, to see what the most effective way of communicating is, and overwhelmingly it was our e-blast. So that came in number 1, and social media and the website came in second, was about 10% or 9%. of that. And advancing to the next slide, which is page 38. Other comments we asked for, just open-ended comments. And some of the things we got were increase the frequency during commute times, bringing back neighborhood commute service. So the most requested were the Mill Valley, Larkspur, Corte Madera, Sir Francis Drake Corridor, San Marin, and Petaluma. So those areas were requesting more neighborhood commute service. Provide better civic center commute service. There was a lot of discussion about better bike storage needed on board buses, although we're kind of constrained by that because of our equipment. And there was definitely some COVID-19 safety protocols that are important to our customers, but it wasn't nearly as much as I anticipated seeing at this juncture, which was good news. And then advancing to page 39, we have some demographic information on our bus passengers. 43% have a household income of $150,000 or above. And race, ethnicity, 72 identified as white Caucasian, 6% Hispanic Latino. Advancing to page 40. Just some bus love comments. Keep up the good work, excellent customer service. I rely on Golden Gate Transit System for 90% of my transit needs. You guys rock. Love the bus drivers. Professional and courteous. Thank you for your staff for working over the pandemic. Great employees and nice staff. So with that, I conclude the bus passenger survey. And then next, I'll move on to Ferry. So we should be on page 41. And again, same, we got a lot more respondents on Ferry this time around than we did in July of 2020. We got 1,001 respondents. The survey was distributed the same method as the bus. Advancing to the next page. So we asked very similar questions, of course. On page 42, we have what was your ridership status? Overwhelmingly 50% were former riders, and only, maybe 37% were currently riding, and that tracks with our ridership numbers. Advancing to the next slide, is 43. As businesses reopen, do you plan to return to your workplace? And again, this tracks with bus. Overwhelmingly, 40% say get full-time, 45% say part-time. So again, it's about the same stats as the bus. Moving on to page 44. Will you consider using Golden Gate Ferry for commuting when you return to work? And obviously, overwhelmingly, 85+% said yes. So that's really good news for us. And if not, why? Again, 30% working from home, 6% personal choice, 6% don't feel safe. And again, remember that's a small amount in the overall respondents. And 5% prefer to drive. When those that responded the top two responses were schedules weren't convenient and it was too expensive. And we've heard that before in our previous surveys. Advancing to page 45. Has your employer communicated a plan for returning to your office? 69 answered yes. And the timing is the same as bus. It tracks. 27% are already back. 32% plan to be back by August. And 26% will be back by December. So overall, 85% will be back to work by December. Again, a much more, a quicker recovery than we anticipated, which is good news. What will your schedule be upon return? Again, traditional, mostly traditional, over 50%, and very little on the shorter shifts and partial days. And the days of the week track with bus too, lighter on Friday, but Monday through Thursday are fairly strong. And how many days a week will you commute? 41% said 3 to 4 days. 29% said 1 to 2 days, which is a little bit stronger than the bus side. So more ferry riders are going to be commuting probably a little bit less, but 63% are going to be commuting 3 to 5 days a week. So advancing to the next slide, which is page 47. We wanted to poll people on whether our current service was working for them, if those trips met their needs. And overwhelmingly, over 70% said no, our current service does not meet their needs. And so we wanted to also ask what departures would they need for planning to help with scheduling as we add back service. And as you can see, the 7:30 a.m. trip was very popular, 7 a.m., and it goes down from there. So some of the top AM trips, when they responded other, because as you can see, that was the second most popular response. The top AM trips were 5:30 and 5:45, 10 a.m. and 10:30, and then the top PM trips, return trips, coming from the city were 7:30 p.m., noon, which I found kind of interesting, and 8 p.m. So that will help Ferry staff figure out their schedule as they return service as demand increases. Advancing to the next slide, page 48. This is polling whether the current Sausalito service, do those trips meet your need? And about 55% said no, it does not. And what additional departures were they requesting? The top two responses were the morning trip leaves too late, and many requested a 6 a.m. and 7 a.m. departure, and a later evening return is needed. And next on, we asked about Tiburon service. This is page 49. Do those trips meet your need? And again, a little over 50% said no, they don't meet our need. And the most requested morning departures were 5:30 a.m. and 7 a.m. and a return trip back at 5 p.m. Moving on to the next slide. This is slide 50. We wanted to know if riders currently had any need for weekend ferry service. And as you can see, over 50% said no, that they did not currently have a need for weekend Larkspur ferry service, or for ferry service. Now, Larkspur, there was about 37, 38% that said they would use weekend service. So that is encouraging. It means people are getting out. Next slide is slide 51, and that is special event service. We wanted to know, would you currently use Larkspur special event ferry service? And I was so surprised about this, and it's very encouraging. But if you look, that almost 50% of respondents said they would use our Oracle Park special event service, and even almost 40% said they'd use Chase Center special event service. So I'm very encouraged by that. And obviously, as you know, we have now reinstated our Giants Ferry. So if you look at that, I mean, that's almost 500 people that said that they get on board that boat. So I'm very happy about that. Advancing to page 52, we asked the same question about driving versus public transportation. And again, overwhelmingly 80%, it tracks with the bus survey, said that it's not a long-term solution for their commute, which is good news for us. Advancing to page 53, again, we asked the same trip planning tools. They ranked the same website, Google Maps, Transit app, which will help us in pushing out information. The same with our survey, 73% heard about the survey through our e-blast and about 10% through social media and website. And then lastly, other comments were more bike space on board, a lot of allow electric bikes and scooters, provide Wi-Fi, which has always been a issue with the passengers there, bring back the shuttles, so primarily referring to the Route 25 that serve the Sir Francis Drake corridor, need more parking and better connections with smart. So those are some other comments. And advancing to page 56, demographics, a little bit different on the ferry side. 65% have a household income of $150,000 or above. And then race, ethnicity, 82% identified white Caucasian, 4% multiracial, and 4% Pacific Islander. So a little bit different than our bus passengers, for sure. And then lastly, the ferry love, page 57. I miss you. Ferry staff are always friendly. Love the ferry. Hurry back and bring back the Sausalito ferry, which I'm happy to announce is back in service. Miss you. Love riding the ferry. Best public transportation available. Thanks for hanging in. Looking forward to coming back. Huge thank you to the Tiburon crew. And would be wonderful if you could take on the weekend schedule. So in conclusion, that ends the findings report. But in conclusion, I think you'll find that it's very encouraging news. The majority of our commuters are going to come back to us in one way or another, and a lot sooner than we expected. And so I find that to be great news for our public transit systems coming back healthy. And I would ask if there are any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Feller, for your really encouraging presentation. Dennis, first, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I just want to let everyone know that it's our intention to bring service back as our customers return, but they have not yet returned en masse yet. Because if you want to get from Reno-Sonoma into San Francisco, we have a monopoly. It's our bridge, our bus, or our boat. Travel in the Golden Gate Corridor is still significantly down. The time of day that it's down the greatest amount is the morning commute period, 5 a.m. to 9 a.m. Mondays through Fridays. It's still down about 40% during that time period, though overall during the course of the day, it's not down as much. The MTC and the Bay Area Council are doing monthly surveys of employers, and it's really helpful data. Our market's a little more nuanced, and so Dana and her team reached out to our customers, and most of our commuters have signed up for the e-alert, so they get a text or email when their bus is running late or their bus schedule changes. And so we have great communication channels. We had great response level from our customers, and so we're just very encouraged by this, and it'll help us in planning to bring back service. But please know that we'll be nimble. If we add service and it's not enough, we'll add more. If we add service and customers aren't quite back yet, we'll scale it back because it costs money to run empty buses and boats. But our goal is to add service to meet the customer demand, and we're excited to see this great news that by the end of the year, most of our customers will be back. And while it won't be the same as before, it'll be a little bit different, perhaps a little less on Mondays and Fridays than historically, which are always light. The fact that the bulk of our customers will come back most of the time is just a huge uplifting message for all of our employees here and for our customers. But with that, Dana and I are available to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
This is Bert. I have a question, 2 questions.
And Director
Hello, you have reached the Mitel voice process. Leave a message. Please enter a mailbox.
All right. Do we have that under control?
We do now. Thank you.
Go ahead. Was that you, Bert?
Yes, it was. Could we go back to page 31?
31, yes. Hold on just 1 minute. Yes.
And I'm going back there too.
Yeah.
Relative to by the way, just in general, this is really positive information. I hope it turns into numbers. It looks it's really optimistic. On relative to the bike, more bike rides, bicycle sales have just gone through the roof. You still have to wait months sometimes to get a bike. There's just such a shortage in the popularity. My curiosity is, do the bike racks that you use, are they secure? Are they the kind that you roll into a secure area? and lock on the outside, or is it just the standard wheel rack? And would you consider surveying as things come up to do that, to get a lot less, well, I hate to say a lot less cars because that might reduce tolls on the bridge, but from a conservation standpoint, that would be highly desirable. Any thoughts?
I'll jump in and let Dana finish off. With respect to bikes and bike parking, there's bikes on our vehicles, whether it's a bus or boat, and there's bike parkings at places where people get on a bike or bus. At the Larkspur Ferry Terminal, we had some bike theft problems many years ago, so we added extensive bike parking inside the paid area. So you have to be a customer to get to the bike. And so there's a tremendous amount of bike parking there. And before the pandemic, it would about half fill up, and we have the ability to add more. With respect to the bus stops, we don't own most of our bus stops. We have about almost 1,000 bus stops that we serve. And the park and ride lots that are listed are all Caltrans park and ride lots. Most of them do not have enclosed bike storage, where you could ride your bike and put it in one of those plastic little bins, if you wish, that we see at some BART stations. So that's something we'd have to work with Caltrans on, since they own these facilities. But Caltrans seems much more receptive to non-motorized traffic in the last year or two, and so that's something we can follow up on. Then on the ferry boats, we do have bike storage on the vessels, and so as customers come back, if that starts to fill up, we'll have to revisit, do we have adequate bike storage or not. But with respect to the park and ride lot, since we don't own that real estate, we'll have to work with Caltrans, who owns those lots, to see what we can do to address this need.
I'll see if I can help that. I chair the District 4, Caltrans District 4 Bicycle Advisory Committee. So I'll bring that up at the next meeting, or actually I'll send them a note about it to ask what they're doing about it. And I'll get it back to you if I get a positive response.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hill.
Multiple sides. The second one was on page 42.
Almost there.
Yeah, the spacey here. The thing that I'm curious about with these numbers, as we all know, we lost about 95%. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dennis, of our ferry riders. But when I look at this statistic that says they're a current rider, 50%, it suggests that this isn't a standard representation of the population to have that high a number of current riders, but that only amounts to 50% of those who ride at 5%. It just didn't seem to fit very well, and then you got an idea on that.
Our ridership is. I'll let Dana go first.
Oh no, go ahead.
Our ridership is quite low on the ferry side, but the people that are going in aren't going in every day. So people may go into the city for a day and then walk from the ferry terminal, say, to the Giants ballpark or someplace else. So I think part of it is that, we don't have a lot of people commuting into the city. There was the grand reopening last Tuesday, but that was just a little over a week ago. And most office buildings in San Francisco are still vacant. And so we don't have people going in on a regular basis, but it seems like people are going in once in a while to explore, and so they may be an occasional rider.
Okay, that still seems pretty high. Looks like it's about 38%. Are going to be current riders. It just didn't seem to fit well. Those are my only comments. Thanks.
Thank you, Director Hill. Are there any more questions or comments?
Director Maxson has a couple of questions.
Yes.
Yeah. I want to thank staff. I know this was a big job, and the results are encouraging. We look forward to it playing out the way we hope it does. I was surprised to see that there were significantly more ferry respondents than transit respondents, and I was wondering why that might have been, and if you had any thoughts on that.
I feel that our ferry passengers are really engaged. Like they, just the demographics, they're just they're very vocal and they're very loyal riders, and I feel like that's most likely why we got more respondents on ferry.
Okay. I have two other questions. Thank you for
Mm-hmm.
that. And this may speak to the first question. So on page 39 and 56, the demographics are seem the demographics pages. The demographics seem pretty skewed to Caucasian high earners, and that brings up the question for me that what type of outreach was there targeting non-Caucasian and lower wage earners? I know when I ride the bus, it seems like there are a lot of significant amount of Latinx passengers and not as many Caucasians. So I was just wondering, how that outreach was done.
Yeah, so we did do a Spanish survey. The bus survey was also done in Spanish. We actually reached out to the Canal Alliance to ask them to help promote the survey. And again, I did the paid advertising, hoping to kind of get those people that aren't already dialed into our eBlast database and stuff like that, hoping to get more of that basic ridership, the basic service ridership that has our commute customers.
If I may, I could offer a little bit also. First off, thanks for asking the question. The demographics of the respondents mirrors pretty closely our demographics of our bus ridership. Before the pandemic, about a third of our bus riders were low income, and that's about what we have in this survey response. Our bus service before the pandemic, about 50% of our bus hours on the road were for what we call our regional service, which operates mobility in the 101 corridor 22 hours a day, connecting Sonoma, Marin, and San Francisco, as well as the Route 40 connecting the Del Norte BART station with the Santa Fe Transit Center, providing the only east-west bus connection. That was about half of our hours of service. The other half of our hours of service before the pandemic were commute service, which is the folks that you see that have the higher incomes. And so our bus commute service is much more high income than our basic service or regional service. But please know that during the pandemic, when we saw a drop in ridership, we cut 90% of our commute service, but we maintained virtually all of our regional bus service, 22 hours a day, so low-income earners could get where they need to go. People that don't own a car or can't afford a car will rely upon us to get to the doctor's office or to a job. So during the pandemic, we were very responsive, and our primary focus was to provide mobility and equity. And going forward, as we add service back, that will be our primary focus. That having been said, we did survey all of our customers, and so the survey respondents do mirror pretty closely what we had prior to the pandemic. And that as we add service back, at some point we may not have enough money to add all the service back. And when we reach that juncture, please know that staff will make recommendations to you based on equity first, and that may cause some tension with your local constituents at various junctures. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Okay. Did we accept snail mail responses to the survey?
No. It was only done electronically.
Okay, because that could also skew the results because a lot of folks can't access the internet and other forms of.
Go ahead. I agree.
All right. So my last question, I forget if the survey asked if a company that our riders are working for are closed permanently. And if it did ask that question, how was that response factored into the results? Because the results look like it's, everybody's going back to work, and that doesn't seem to be the case.
So we did not ask that question. We did ask for their employer's name, and surprisingly, I was very surprised at this. A lot of people shared their employers' names with us, which I'm really happy about because that's going to potentially give us some information for outreach. When people start to go back, we can look at who these people are working for, and we can directly contact them and work with them to get people back on transit. So I was encouraged by that, but no, we did not actually ask the question about whether they were not employed any longer.
Right. Yeah, because that could have a big impact as well, or an impact anyway.
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much. Those are my questions.
Oh, absolutely.
Yep.
So are there any further questions or comments?
Yeah, this is Dick Graswell. I just had one question.
Yes, please, Dick.
You know, I had asked this at one of the board meetings a couple months ago. Has there been any further discussion among the staff as to whether or not it might be appropriate to offer discounts or inducements to get people to get back on the ferry in particular, or the bus?
Thank you for asking. So I briefed our board president, first vice president, and second vice president that we're going to do a bunch of promotional things coming up. You know, the grand reopening was last Tuesday, and people are venturing out, and each day I think they're getting a little less cautious. I'm referring to folks that are fully vaccinated. And so we didn't want to do something the next day. But the 4th of July weekend is coming up, and there's a lot of outdoor activities. A lot of communities have parades. San Francisco will have fireworks. And so on the weekend of the 4th, which is the 3rd, 4th, and the 5th, the Monday's a holiday, we will have Golden Gate Ferry and Golden Gate Transit free for that holiday weekend for those 3 days. Because the challenge is a lot of our customers have not ridden a bus or a boat in 15 months. They say they're not scared, but to make them take that first step across the threshold, to get on a bus or get on a boat for the first time, we do want to entice them. And to see fireworks, to go to a parade in the next town over, are things that may entice them. And so we will have free service, and Marin Transit will also offer free service on that same weekend. And so we'll do joint marketing with them. Then we're in discussions with SMART about bringing back the promotions for Sail and Rail and Weekender passes, but expanding those greatly. So we'll be doing a lot of promotional things to encourage people, because we think the challenge is that first trip. It's kind of like the first time you walk into an establishment without wearing a face mask. It feels a little weird, but after you've done that first time, the second time's a lot easier. So we do have a few things planned, and that's the upcoming one. And that'll have been about 2.5 weeks after the grand reopening. So hopefully folks will have been out and about a little bit, so they'll be tempted to take advantage of the opportunity. We'll do extensive marketing of that, multilingual marketing, reaching all the markets in our service area.
Thank you, Dennis. That's exciting, too. Are there any other questions or comments from the directors?
Chair Fredericks, this is Director Rodoni.
Please go ahead, Director Rodoni.
Thank you. I was wondering, when you did the survey, whether you tested whether the respondent was a previous Golden Gate user or not, and what that breakout would have looked like.
Yes, we did on both. That would be under the first slide of whether they were a former rider or a current rider. And former riders were ones that were previously using Golden Gate Transit for their commute.
And I guess I was looking for what the potential rider would be looking for, and someone that hadn't maybe used the system. So yeah. we wouldn't know if we had a large response from that group.
Slide 26 on the bus side shows it, and there's a companion slide on the ferry side. So we asked, are you current, former, potential, new, or other? So we did get the first part of your area of interest. We may not have explored the potential or other deep enough, though.
Yeah. And I'm thinking about more who responded, whether we had more responses from current and former riders rather than potential riders. That's sort of the breakdown of those groups is sort of what I was curious about.
Yeah, the vast majority were current or former riders. The potential or other was about 15%.
Thank you.
And I'll be excited to actually drill down on that potential new rider segment that responded. I'd like, we'll drill down and find out where they reside, and that will help us with our service planning as well, and trying to attract those new riders.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions, comments on item 4 from the directors?
Madam Chair, this is Director Hernandez.
Please proceed.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Thank you to the presenter for a wonderful report. And yes, lots of good news. My question is this. This report was generated the end of May. It's now the end of June, going into July. And about the percentages of riders that say that their needs are not being met as of the end of July. 65% of transit riders and 70% of ferry riders. I'm wondering if there have been any changes to service that you can note that might address those needs that came up in the report, seeing as how we have reinstated the ballpark services, and Sausalito, thankfully, is going to be up and running again as before. But it seems, it just, on the face of it, it looks like we're prioritizing our ballpark customers and not our regular commute customers. So I'm wondering if any of those, any additional changes have been made to address that 65 and 75% of customers who say that they're not satisfied. Thank you.
Thanks. It's a great question. On the bus side, on the bus side, we added some additional bus service on June 13th. At this juncture, we're still not carrying very many people on our buses and boats. At this juncture, people are looking at our schedule saying that's not going to work for me, but their boss hasn't opened their building in downtown San Francisco yet. Our busiest ferry trip since the start of the pandemic was last Thursday, where the 5:30 trip leaving San Francisco headed back to Larkspur was half full. And people aren't driving into the city either. So we think people are projecting ahead that they think the schedule may not be adequate for them. And we will add service as people come back. But we did add some bus service recently, and we have a whole series of different schedules for bus and ferry that we're looking at rolling out as we see that slight uptick to occur. But our busiest ferry trip was only half full. We all got excited last Thursday at 5:30 when that happened. So we're tracking all the data on a daily basis, and we will add it as people come back. But it's really tied to the reopening of downtown San Francisco for a commute service on the bus side and on the ferry side. The reason we added the Giants ballpark service is the Giants were selling a very limited number of tickets prior to this week. With the grand reopening last Tuesday, they were away. This Friday represents their first home game. It's the Bay Bridge Series against the A's. The Giants are doing well, and it is a game where they will not limit ticket sales, so it's likely to be a sellout. We'll have a fireworks show after. We would much rather people take transit to that large civic event as opposed to driving into San Francisco, particularly since after the game, they'll encounter a lane closure on the Golden Gate Bridge for our ongoing suicide deterrent system construction.
Thank you very much, Dennis. And I understand that there are some nuances in the numbers as reflected in the study. I just wanted to make sure that our regular commute folks are high on the list as well. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Director Hernandez. Are there any further questions from the directors?
Chair Fredericks, this is Bert Hill again. I've got a question for Dennis.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Dennis, that plan for the July 4th weekend is really encouraging. I really think that's a great idea. The only concern I have is that maybe you should have in your pocket a plan B where it is so successful, kind of like the 50th anniversary on the Golden Gate Bridge, where far more people show up, and especially if they take SMART down and they find that there's just no capacity left, and they've got to find out with Plan B. Do you have an alternative in case it's way more successful than you're predicting? And I think it might be, considering the number of people who go down for events. Yeah.
We hope we're overrun with people, and we're planning for that possibility. The last thing we want to do is encourage people to ride they haven't ridden in 15 months, and it's a bad experience. So we will pay people to be on standby on site that weekend who we initially don't plan on using. So we will have a full crew at our ferry facility in Larkspur willing to hop on a boat if we start getting overrun. We'll have the extra board. We have a bench of drivers that we have come in. We'll have extra staff come in on the bus driver side during the weekend. So if we need to put extra buses out there to meet a surge in demand, we'll have the ability to do that. So Mona and Jim are already planning for that. And that's based on many years ago, they had Spare the Air days that were free. We set a record other than after the Loma Prieta earthquake for when we carried the most people. And so free sells well. Offering a 20% or 30% discount doesn't sell well, but if you say it's free, there's activities to go to, we do think that it's possible we could be that successful. And so Jim and Mona have plans in place from an operational perspective to address that. And I only hope that that happens.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much, Dennis.
Are there any further comments or questions from the directors? I'm hearing none. Do you hear anything, Madam Secretary?
No, I'm not, but I do have currently 2 public comment speakers on the line, but I'd like a second to poll to see if we had more that joined during the presentation that would like to speak. If you could bear with us a second.
Yes, thank you. We're pausing for any public response.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. We've pulled the line again. We have 2 public speakers for this item. In a second, I am going to ask David Pilpel to join us on this call. David, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me now?
We sure can.
Great. Good morning, David Pilpel. So just to reiterate a couple of comments that I've made before, I hope I'm not repeating myself, and I hope I'm not repeating myself. Since Muni is still not serving the Golden Gate Bridge toll plaza, I still think we should restore some Geary Boulevard Golden Gate transit trips, the 92 or some other service. And I am still researching open door versus closed door bus service in San Francisco, and I hope that stays post-pandemic. On to new comments. I still think that now is a great time to try new bus and ferry services to increase transit ridership. I appreciate the discussion you just had about special event ferry service. There may be other opportunities for trying new bus routes in Marin and Sonoma that would not just bring back ridership, but actually bring new ridership to the system. I would try to have the fall bus sign up take effect in late August rather than early September, if it's possible to move that up by a couple of weeks to coordinate with school opening and return to work. Again, if that's possible. I would also conduct passenger surveys like this more often, perhaps even once or twice a year. I think this, at least the information that we got this morning, was very, very helpful. And I agree with, I think, Director Maston, who asked about having more outreach so that perhaps the survey data aligns better with the demographics of the ridership. But in any event, this is great information that agencies, including the district, often don't have, and totally helpful. So I would do this more often. As to ferry marketing, don't forget Lunch for the Office Bunch and the Merry Ferry. Those were old district ferry promotions, and maybe you can bring those back. Great work on the survey and on marketing in general. And finally, the demographic pieces suggest to me that maintaining bus fares where they are, or even a slight reduction, or the kinds of promotions that the general manager talked about on the bus side, makes sense, but that slightly higher ferry fares may be viable given the demographics of the ferry ridership. So just thinking longer term about how to keep both the bus and ferry operations in balance relative to budget. Those are my thoughts on item 4. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, David. I'm going to move on to the next speaker, and I'm going to ask Deborah Terschwell to join us.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to weigh in here. I am a Golden Gate rider and a bus rider, have been for well over a decade. I want to thank you for the excellent survey. It's showing that 65% of bus riders are not satisfied with the current service needs. And what I want to emphasize here is the need to bring back the civic center buses. Unlike, I'm hearing things that are causing me great concern, reference to bringing back service by December, which seems awfully slow to me in relationship to other transit agencies who are moving faster to get employees back to work and accommodate work schedules. I'm hearing a concern with downtown San Francisco employees. I'm here to tell you Civic Center employees are largely government workers. Our offices are open. We are the most frustrated commuters among employees because of Golden Gate Transit not having sufficient service. The three lines that work very, very well and were very, very popular were the 24C, which I ride, the 4C, and the 54C. Civic Center workers really rely on those buses. They are excellent. I found the 24C to be incredibly reliable and convenient. Without a combination of neighborhood service or Civic Center bus service, it's incredibly frustrating for people to get to work. I can just relate. Anecdotally, people in my office have had a terrible time getting to and from work. Some have had 2-hour commutes each way because of an inadequate number of buses and poor connection times. 2-hour commutes each way are not tenable and sustainable. Neither is driving in and paying exorbitant parking fees and also a toll at the bridge. So really, I would really, really urge you to restore Civic Center service, float some of those buses first, maybe. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. Just from my observations, government workers are back at work already. The survey shows that 30% of respondents for the bus survey were already back at work, with 25% coming back in the June to August time period. We're already at the June time period. The bus service that's there is not adequate currently. I'm really begging you to restore Civic Center bus service. And if you build it, they will come, is sort of my message to you. The survey reached a certain number of people. I think there are a lot of people who didn't know about it and who did not have an opportunity to weigh in. Why not float some buses and see what happens? Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Terschwell. Thank you for your comments there. Director Fredericks, Chair Fredericks, that concludes the public comment.
Thank you. Are there any further comments from the directors? I am hearing none.
Yeah, this is Dick Graswell.
Dick, yes, I'm sorry.
That's all right. Maybe it'd be good if the general manager responded to that person's comments about the Civic Center trips. It seems to be pretty reasonable and not an unfair request. Do we have any plans in that regard?
Not this month. We're not seeing a lot of travel in the corridor, and to run a bus for 1 or 2 people is cost prohibitive, and we're still trying to conserve resources. So we are tracking travel in the corridor, which is bridge, bus, and ferry. And during the morning commute is still way down. The bridge is down 40%. Bus is down 75%. Ferry's down about 90%. And so if we add a lot of service quickly, the build it and they will come mentality, we will burn through a lot of one-time federal money. We will be, putting a lot of greenhouse gas emissions out there, and we won't be carrying people because no one's sneaking into the city unless they're swimming across the strait. So we will add service back. We are looking at when schools reopen. There's lots of school districts in Marin, and we're polling to find out when they'll all go back. We think a lot of the return that's in the June to August time period will be tied to when people have their children back in school and they'll be able to go back. But right now, there's very little travel in the corridor, 5 a.m. to 9 a.m. So we're not embracing yet the build it and they will come attitude. We added a little service about a week ago, and we'll incrementally add service back. And we have Civic Center service, but it is not direct. It's off the 101 corridor. But every bus stops at the toll plaza. And so we have several buses an hour that go down the Civic Center corridor down Van Ness Avenue. But at this juncture, we're not seeing a lot of travel. And so we're very cautious about how we add service back. But we think the reopening of schools will be a big milestone that we're looking forward to. But if we see demand as we add trips, if we see demand as trips start filling up, we'll add more. But we added a little bit on the 13th to experiment, and we'll add more every couple of weeks.
I guess her comment that the government workers have already come back seems real to me. I think a lot of them are back. So I guess if we could get a report back on this in the next 4 to 6 weeks, just to see where you're at on it, because
sure.
It seemed to be a pretty fair request, and it does seem like if anybody's back, it is the government workers.
It depends on the government agency. Caltrans is not back at work. MTC is not back at work. So it really depends on the agencies. The Civic Center employment base is primarily government, but government embraces the city and county of San Francisco, various state agencies, and some regional agencies. And, we are trying to understand how people reopen. The Bay Area Council does monthly polling with MTC of employers. And at this juncture, most employers in San Francisco are not open, and they just reopened City Hall partially. But most state offices are not open at this juncture. Caltrans is a great example. They're not in San Francisco, but they're not open. And the MTC building, which houses ABAG and BCDC and the Air Board, is not open except for the private tenants. So while there's been some return, it's a pretty minimal return of office workers into downtown San Francisco who are government employees. And as more government agencies come back, we'll add service. What we're hearing from various agencies we've approached is we think the government workers will be slower to go back than the private employers. Most private employers are encouraging workers to come back much sooner, generally, than most government agencies. And most government agencies that we've talked to are not going to have most employees come back until December. But if there's specific employers that are out there that we're not aware of, we would look forward to hearing who they may be, and we'll query them and poll them to find out what their plans are.
All right, thank you.
So, Dennis, just as a follow-up on that, another variable that we would need to have a sense of is what percentage of the ridership do government employees represent? Do they tend to be transit riders?
They do. They tend to get employer benefits to help offset the cost of transit. And so they generally tend to be transit riders. Most office workers in downtown San Francisco are transit riders. Downtown San Francisco pre-pandemic would fill up with hundreds of thousands of people every day, and the vast majority of them would get to San Francisco by some form of transit, whether it's Muni, Golden Gate, BART, AC Transit, Caltrain, or others. And so the key is, when do offices reopen? That's really the key. That's something we don't control, and that's something that we're tracking, particularly the MTC Bay Area Council data that comes out monthly. But we also, for the government agencies, we talk to many of them, and we ask them, and their plans may change, and so it is important that we continue our contacts with them. But if there are public agencies that are open in the Civic Center area, it'd be great to know who those are, other than the city and county of San Francisco with a partial reopening, so that we can make sure that we're addressing the needs of their employees.
Yes, thank you. Is there any further discussion on this item?
Madam Chair, I'd like to make one more comment, please.
Director Hernandez?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I just wanted to sort of add my voice to this conversation about the needs in downtown San Francisco, Civic Center, and other areas. I believe that transit does play a role in terms of the recovery of the economy, and build that they will come attitude. There's some value in that. It seems like some of the explanations, Dennis, you provided are focused on government workers, but there are lots of restaurant workers that are supporting the folks that have come down back to work. There are lots of folks that work in the downtown buildings that have opened and are doing maintenance and lots of jobs like that. So I just want us to maintain an open mind, and I really want to let the comment maker know this morning that there are those of us on the board that are concerned about this. Your San Francisco representatives certainly, and I really feel like this needs a little bit more closer evaluation and action. Thank you very much.
So we'll report back next month. If I may, we'll report back next month on what service we've added and what the ridership is. because we do offer service that deals with the workers that Director Hernandez referred to. We have, maintained our regional bus service that, operates before any of us are awake and operates after any of us are long asleep. We've maintained that through the pandemic, so those service workers can get the jobs in San Francisco, and that is robust service. But that's different than a commute route, an express bus that goes into the neighborhoods in Marin, then does, after a handful of stops, gets to the 101 corridor and goes express to the Civic Center area. That is a different customer. It's a different market. But please know that for the low-wage earners, service workers, and those that don't have access to automobiles, we have been providing regional mobility throughout the pandemic and will continue to. And as we add service back, that will be our first service that really expand that as a priority, as opposed to those who may have more options.
Thank you for that clarification, Dennis. Is there any further discussion on this item?
Madam Chair, this is David Rabbit.
Please.
And I appreciate the discussion, and I think that we're all very much concerned about making sure that we don't get caught flat-footed. And I guess that goes to my question, and I don't envy anyone in trying to predict when something that is totally outside of our control will occur, as in, offices opening up and mass. I know that every agency that I'm involved with is still trying to figure it out, and they don't have a definitive date. And but Dennis, I guess my question to you is, how do we expand and make sure that we're nimble so that when this thing does hit, which could happen pretty quickly, that we don't get caught flat-footed, that we can adjust as quickly as possible? Maybe you could just talk about that.
Certainly. And the bus and ferry sides are different. On the bus side, a lot of our bus operators bid what's called a run. It's a set piece of work that they'll drive for the next 3 months. Other drivers choose not to bid for runs, or they don't have seniority to bid for runs, and they're on our bench, which we call the extra board. So we have a bench of operators who come into work without assigned work that day. And we have sufficient operators on our extra board that if all of a sudden we needed to, tomorrow, add a couple extra bus trips, we have the staff on ready to do that. That having been said, we have had some attrition in the last year. So we're actually starting, even though we don't have a need today, the recruitment to get a list of potential bus candidates for bus driver training if we get slammed and things come back quicker than we think. But right now we have surplus drivers who come in and get a minimal day of pay, who are available to otherwise drive additional service if there's a need for that service. And if there is, we'll add them. On the ferry side, we have staff that is also available. We were operating a mass vaccination site up until last Thursday at 7 p.m. We operated it for 4 months with ferry staff who would help with logistics and traffic control. So we had ferry captains who would spend half of their day in the parking lot managing the deckhands who were managing traffic, and the other half of their day they'd be on a boat. So we have some ferry staff who are available. Also on the ferry side, we have a hiring hall. So traditionally, not this year, for a baseball service, we would call the hall and get extra staff to come and operate boats. So we have a lot of flexibility. On the ferry side, we've put together 6 different sets of schedules that we could roll out at various junctures as people come back. Like I said, last Thursday, we had 1 trip that was half full. While that was exciting, we have a long ways to go. We're only operating 6 trips a day out of Larkspur. Before the pandemic, we're offering 42 trips. Before the pandemic, on Thursdays, we would sell out multiple trips in the morning and multiple trips in the afternoon with service every 30 minutes. So we have a way to go. But in terms of being nimble, we do have a bus driver bench that we call the extra board. On the ferry side, we have some staff that don't have their full days on the boats. We have them doing maintenance and other activities now. And on the ferry side, we have a hiring hall. So we hope to be able to be responsive and to not be caught flat-footed.
Thank you for this. It sounds like a plan. Is there any more comment or questions from the Board of Directors? I am hearing none. Thank you, staff, for that presentation. No action is required. It's an informational report. We move on to agenda item number 5, which is the monthly report on bridge traffic, transit ridership trends, and transit service performance. The staff report begins on page 59. Dennis, do you have anything to report related to this item?
Just one thing. Please peruse it at your leisure. On page 40 shows the bridge single month year-over-year change, not annualized. And it shows you the overall bridge total, but it also shows you the bridge AM peak. And that's where you see, for April, bridge peak traffic, which is Monday through Friday, 5 to 9, was still down during the morning commute 40%. So the travel that's currently occurring in the corridor, which is down overall, is primarily people out doing things midday and night, and that the biggest drop in travel that we have is during the morning commute period. And so we look forward to that changing. More recently, since this report was prepared, we've seen a slight uptick with the reopening last week. That bridge traffic is still down about 20% overall. And with that, I'm available to answer any questions.
Are there any questions from the directors?
Director Maston, I have a question.
Please, Director Maston.
On page 63, if I understand it correctly, the April farebox recovery percentage is a metric based on our short-term transit plan, but the passengers per trip is an actual number. And if that's correct, do we know what the actual farebox recovery percentage is?
Our current farebox recovery is quite low. So in August of 19, that was actual farebox recovery. So in August of 2019, our bus trips, passengers per trip was 23. Looking at the top line, our bus farebox recovery for the bus side was a robust 26.1%. We have a metric on bus passengers of 20 passengers per trip on commute service and a metric of 10 passengers per trip on our regional bus service, which is that 22 hours a day mobility and equity in the corridor. On the ferry side, we have a metric of 100 passengers per trip average. You saw that we had 133 in August of 2019, and that the ferry farebox recovery was 57.9% in then. So those are showing actuals from that time period. Then if you scroll down to the current, we see that our bus metric we cut. So for perspective, we have cut 90% of our commute bus service, but kept most of our regional bus service. So we've cut about 50% of our bus service hours in April 2021. And we cut 75% of our ferry service, weekday ferry service, and all of our weekend ferry service. That having been done, our average bus in April of 2021 had 10 passengers, and they had a farebox recovery of 6.3%. Those are actual. So that 10 is less than the 20 average that we would want on a commute service, but it's what we would want on our regional service. On the ferry side, instead of having 100 passengers per trip, we average 22 passengers per trip. Our smallest ferry boat holds 400 passengers. So our smallest ferry boat is 400 passengers. We average 22 passengers a trip. That's the actual number for that very little ferry service we have out there. And our farebox recovery, instead of being, the high 50% was 2.1%. So this table shows actual numbers, but it's important to understand that we cut most of our ferry service and most of our bus service, and we still have these results.
Okay. So looking at the bus side, August 19, 23 passengers per trip, farebox recovery 26%. And April 21, it's 10 bus passengers per trip and 6% recovery. And I would think that if those numbers relate to each other, the 19 and the 21 numbers, that you'd see a recovery of somewhere around 10 or 11% in April of 21.
We still have the same number of bus drivers working for us. So while we have less, so we're spending less on fuel and less on wheel costs, but our labor costs they're down some because we don't have the long days, but our labor costs are pretty constant. We did not lay anybody off. And so we have a lot of workers on our extra board, some of whom drive some days and some of whom don't drive very much on some days. And we have a lot of drivers out on leave because of COVID. And so that's why the farebox recovery is so low, even though we have 10 passengers per trip average.
Okay. Got it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Director Maston. Are there any further comments from the directors? I'm hearing none. Madam Secretary, is there anyone from the public wishing to speak on this item?
There's no speaker on this item.
Thank you. So, informational report, no action is required. The next item is item number 6, a brief staff report with a link to Marin Transit's website to view its meetings and activities. Dennis, do you have anything to report related to this item?
Yeah, just for informational purposes, to remind the committee that the Bridge District provides regional transportation in the Golden Gate Corridor. Marin Transit is a local bus operator providing service within Marin County. We are one of 3 vendors they have providing their scheduled bus route service. They have a contract with us, they have a contract with the Marin Airport, and a contract with a private entity called MV Transportation. Our contract is coming to a close. Marin Transit is interested in continuing the relationship with us. So I just want the committee to be aware that our staff is in negotiation with Marin Transit on continuing that relationship. And at some future date, we hope to have an agreement that will be taken to you, but I just want to let you know that those negotiations are ongoing. And with that, I'm available to answer any questions that you might have.
Are there any questions or comments from the directors on this item? I'm hearing none. There is no action associated with item number 6. Is there anyone from the public wishing to speak on the item or address the committee under item number 7, which is public comment?
We actually do. We have a speaker under item 7 for public comment. We have no speakers for item number 6. So I'm going to connect the public line in a second, and Mr. Pilpel is back with us. Okay. David, are you still there with us?
Yep. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
Okay. I thought I heard Director Hill jump in, but that's okay. So on item 7, I only had one question. I'm wondering about the status of the San Rafael Transit Center relocation project draft EIR that was discussed at this committee a month or 2 or 3 ago. And I thought that draft EIR was going to be out soon, and I haven't seen it yet, and there's no update on the website. So perhaps if one of you could ask, or if we could just get a quick answer on where that is in the process, I would love that. Thank you very much.
The draft EIR should be out next month in July. The consultant needed some time after the board selected the preferred alternative for the purposes of the draft EIR last month to finalize the document. So you should see that middle of next month.
Thank you, Dennis. Is there any further public comment? Madam Secretary?
I believe we do have one more person. If I could just give me 1 second to double check. I believe somebody joined the line, so hang on 1 second. All right, thank you. We do have 2 more speakers that are going to be joining us in a second. Mr. Weinstein, are you there with us?
I am. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate you. To the committee, Shane Weinstein, president of the ATU. You know, I was just listening to a little bit earlier. First of all, there isn't one single bus driver that's on an eligibility list. There still needs to be testing and interviews done before you can even create an eligibility list. So if we were to get caught flat-footed, we are prime for it. You know, it's a little bit difficult for me as the president of the union to kind of sit around and listen to the GM say that there are people sitting around because they're on the extra board. These people have worked through the pandemic. 15% of the members caught COVID, and we're kind of downplaying the fact that they worked their tails off. So it's pretty difficult to listen to. The ARP funding, the money which is going to be coming in, and we're waiting on that from the MTC right now, that was put into place so that we could put buses back on the road for when the recovery happens. And it's obviously coming back, and the survey denotes that. So please pay attention to that survey when they say 76% of people said they are going to use Golden Gate Transit, and up to 70% are going to use it 4 days a week. We need to get the buses back out there. We've ghosted the entire town of Mill Valley. We've ghosted the entire town of Fairfax, important parts of Petaluma. We need to get buses back on the road so the public can start taking them. When the bus doesn't go by, the public forgets that there's a bus there. The money is there from the ARP funding. Let's please start to use it, Mr. Mulligan. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Weinstein. And then we have a second speaker. First name is Shelley. Shelley, can you go ahead?
I didn't say anything about the raise, man.
Okay. Can I speak now?
Yes, you may. Go ahead.
Okay. There was some discussion previously about conducting more surveys and that the surveys were hard to find. I think that would be a good idea. And as more people are coming back, they'll have more access to it and they'll be looking at this. But there was a comment earlier that there are several buses going to the Civic Center from the Golden Gate corridor every hour in the morning. And there's 3 buses every hour. And I take the 54 to Golden Gate, and it arrives at the exact same time as the 30 and the 101. So I have to get out of the bus and run to catch one of those because connection times are really kind of funky. However, if I miss it, then I'm there for half an hour until the 70. You know, if this is all, you can check it on the schedule and see how it works. But I just would like to say that my definition of several doesn't equate 3. I would like to see another survey, and there are 3 courts here. There's the First District Court of Appeal, there's the Supreme Court, and there's also the 9th District and the Superior Court, 4 courts. And we're all back at work, and a lot of us do have to work in the Civic Center. So there's also the FBI. They're back at work. So, you know, I just don't know how to say it. We do need more Civic Center service, and we do have the agencies, and the people are back. Thank you.
Thank you, Shelley. Thank you for those comments. Chair Fredericks, that concludes public comments. Chair Fredericks, are you still there?
Yes, but she was on mute.
Oh, sorry.
In the beginning of the public comment period, David mentioned that Director Hill wanted to speak. Is that correct, Director Hill?
No, I was just listening.
Okay.
I didn't try to speak.
All right. So that concludes the public comment. There's no action. And I think we need a motion to adjourn this meeting.
Can we have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you. Can we have a second? Thank you.
Did we get a second, Madam Secretary?
I didn't hear one.
Are we having
second Rodoni?
There we go. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If there are no objections, this concludes the meeting of the Transportation Committee. Thank you, colleagues. The time is now 10:25 a.m.